Have you ever woken up in the morning, looked at the clock, and felt heavy before the day even began? You know you have responsibilities, you know you need to work, but deep inside there's a quiet tiredness you can't quite name. It's like you're in the right career, yet somehow disconnected from the work itself. I've heard this story over and over again from young people living in today's world. One of my clients once told me, "I think there's something wrong with me because I don't hate my job, but I don't love it either. I just do it because I have to." I remember looking at him for a long moment and saying, "There's nothing wrong with you. You've just forgotten the meaning your work once had in your life." We're living in a strange era. On one hand, work gives us income, opportunity, and stability. On the other, it brings pressure, expectations, and the constant feeling that we're never good enough. And then we start asking questions like, how do I love the job I have now? Or bigger than that, how do I find joy in what I'm doing today, even if it isn't perfect? I want you to imagine this. You're standing in a softly lit room, no noise, no deadlines, no emails, just you and your breath. When your mind isn't being stretched by tasks and timelines, you can see your work differently. Not as a burden, but as a path. Not as something forced on you, but as a place for growth. That's the Stoic view of work. Stoics don't search for the perfect job. They look for value in every action. They don't expect everything to be easy. They see difficulty as a form of training, and most importantly, they remind themselves, happiness doesn't come from what you do, it comes from how you do it. A friend of mine in San Francisco once told me he used to hate his office job so much that every morning felt like a negotiation with himself. Just one more day, please. But after a while practicing Stoic principles, something shifted. He said, "When I stopped expecting my job to inspire me every day, I finally found peace in simply doing the small things well." And honestly, that's one of the most important Stoic ideas. Satisfaction doesn't come from big tasks, it comes from the small tasks done with the right attitude. Maybe you felt that too, like you're running, but you're not sure what you're running toward. Or no matter how much you accomplish, it never feels quite fulfilling. If you're watching this video and you felt that way, I want you to know this: you're not alone. This is human. This is normal. This is the reality of modern life. The good news is you can change this. You don't have to change your job, your environment, or your whole life. Sometimes you just need to change your perspective. Stoicism teaches us that every job, no matter what it is an opportunity to train yourself. Patience, focus, responsibility, emotional control. When you see your work as part of your inner training, you start to feel more connected to it. You stop expecting it to make you happy, and you start feeling happy because you're doing it well. A young woman once asked me, "Should I quit my job?" I'm so bored with it I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked her, "What exactly makes you bored? The job? Or the way you're looking at it?" She didn't speak for a while. Then she said, "Looking at it." And that was the first moment she learned something very Stoic. Change begins from the inside. Next time you go to work, I want you to observe yourself for a moment. Are you rushing through everything? Do you give yourself time to see the value in the small tasks? Are you pressuring yourself with things beyond your control? When you start asking these questions, your job stops feeling like an enemy. It starts becoming a teacher. In this video, we're going to explore 7 Stoic-inspired ways to fall in love with your current job. Not in a blind or self-delusional way, but in a mature, grounded way. Loving your work because you understand its meaning. Loving it because you see yourself growing. Loving it because even if the job isn't perfect, you can still find peace and pride in what you do daily. So if you're ready, take a slow, deep breath, keep your mind open, and join me on this journey. A journey of seeing your work with new eyes, a steadier heart, and a Stoic spirit strengthened over time. As we begin this journey of learning how to fall in love with our current work again, the first thing I want you to remember is this: feeling stuck, burnt out, or uninspired does not mean you're on the wrong path. Sometimes it's simply a sign that you've been looking at your work from too narrow a perspective. Stoics never expect life to be gentle with them. They choose to be gentler with themselves when life gets heavy. And that's exactly what leads us into the first principle. 1. Accept the reality of your job instead of expecting perfection. One day, in a therapy session in Los Angeles, a young man sat across from me and said, "I thought my job was supposed to make me happy, but the more I work, the emptier I feel." He voiced something millions of young people quietly feel: the expectation that work must inspire you, must match your passion, must be fulfilling every day, must check all the boxes of purpose. I asked him, "Who told you that your job must inspire you every single day?" He was silent for a long time. We live in an era where social media convinces us that everyone else is madly in love with their work. We see people posting achievements, excitement, passion, but we don't see their tired days, their boring days, or their days of wanting to quit. And slowly we start comparing. Why isn't my job as exciting as theirs? Stoicism teaches us this fundamental truth. All suffering begins when we resist reality. When the job doesn't match our fantasy, we feel disappointed. When co-workers don't meet our expectations, we feel frustrated. When things move slower than we want, we feel discouraged. And inside that disappointment, we lose sight of the real value of our work. A Stoic would say, begin by accepting things as they are. No sugarcoating, no denial, no complaining, just seeing clearly. When you accept reality, your mind opens. And when your mind opens, you finally create space to love a job that isn't perfect, but still meaningful. I asked the young man that day, if you stopped expecting your job to be amazing, what would you see? He exhaled and smiled gently. I'd see that it's not as bad as I think. That's the first step to loving your work again, seeing it with clear eyes, not distorted by unrealistic expectations. 2. Focus on what you can control at work. There's a quote from Epictetus that I deeply love. Freedom begins the moment you stop worrying about the things outside your control. In any job, there are countless things you cannot control: your boss's personality, your co-workers' moods, client demands, sudden changes, overlapping deadlines, or endless meetings you can't escape. When you let these factors dominate your emotional world, work feels heavy. You lose your sense of agency. I once worked with a young woman who was constantly stressed because her boss was overly strict. She told me, "He completely kills my motivation." I asked her, "Do you think you can change your boss's personality?" She laughed. "Of course not." Then I asked, "So what can you change?" She paused for a while before saying, "Maybe how I respond to him." And that right there is the key. Stoics never waste mental energy on things that don't belong to them. They invest everything into what is theirs: their effort, their attitude, their reaction, their craftsmanship. When you focus on what you control, you start to feel stronger. Work stops being something that happens to you and becomes a place where you actively create value. That sense of agency is one of the biggest reasons people rediscover love for their work. 3. Find meaning in the smallest tasks. One of the biggest mistakes young people make is believing that only special or big tasks create meaning. A normal office job? Boring. A day of files and emails? Pointless. A meeting without breakthroughs? Waste of time. But Stoics see work differently. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You were born to do good work, and every action, no matter how small, has meaning when done with kindness and attention." I once had a client who hated her job because she thought it was dull, but when I asked her, "What did you do today that was even slightly better than yesterday?" she paused, and for the first time she noticed the small things she had been overlooking: writing a clearer email, helping a new coworker, handling a tough meeting better than before. Those small things are meaning. Meaning doesn't come from the task itself. It comes from the mindset you bring into the task. When you begin to see the value in the small things, work starts feeling lighter. And when work becomes lighter, you naturally begin to love it more. 4. Build discipline to feel a sense of progress every day. A lot of people don't dislike their jobs because the job is terrible. They dislike it because they feel like they're not growing. The human mind is wired to love progress. If you repeat the same thing every single day, eventually you'll feel stuck. And feeling stuck is one of the fastest ways to kill motivation. In Stoicism, discipline isn't self-punishment, it's a form of self-respect. Discipline creates progress. Progress creates pride. Pride creates love for the work you do. I once coached a young man who felt completely discouraged because he thought he wasn't going anywhere. We didn't change his job. We didn't change his environment. We changed his habits. Every day he chose one small thing to improve. The way he took notes, his organization skills, his communication, or how he managed his time. 2 months later he told me, "I realized I never hated my job. I just hated feeling like I wasn't improving." Discipline helps you feel a little more valuable each day. And when you feel yourself growing, you naturally start loving your work, not because you forced yourself to, but because it feels meaningful again. Once you begin noticing small daily improvements, you realize your job isn't just a place to make a living. It's a place where you're growing, learning, and confronting yourself. And that brings us to the next Stoic principle, something we all know but rarely practice deeply: separating personal emotions from the frustrations of the workplace. 5. Separate personal emotions from work frustrations. One of the biggest reasons young people burn out isn't workload, it's the meaning they attach to everything. A short email from your boss, a blunt piece of feedback, a tense meeting, all these quickly become, "They don't like me," "I'm not good enough," "They're judging me." I once worked with a talented young man who panicked any time someone mentioned one of his mistakes. When I asked, what do you think that means?" He said, "It means they think I'm terrible." But the truth is often much simpler. It's just work. A mistake is a mistake, a correction is a correction. It doesn't define your worth. Stoics say, it's not the event that hurts you, it's the story you tell yourself about the event. When you separate your emotions from the situation, you begin to understand something essential. Most of the pressure you feel comes from putting your ego into everything. A coworker's comment isn't a personal attack. A tight deadline isn't disrespect. A piece of feedback isn't a judgment of your character. I told that young man, "You're not defined by a small mistake. You're defined by how you get back up and respond to it." A few weeks later, he returned with a much calmer presence. He said, "When I stop reacting emotionally, everything becomes easier." Exactly. When you stop taking things personally, you work with more clarity, more ease, and with far less emotional exhaustion. Detaching your emotions isn't coldness, it's protecting your peace. 6. Practice gratitude for the job you have. There's something I've noticed about young people today. They're very good at seeing what they lack, but rarely notice what they already have. The designer wants more creativity, the office worker wants more freedom, the freelancer wants more stability, and slowly we forget that the job we currently complain about is the same job we once dreamed of having. A friend once told me, "When I was a student, all I wanted was a job that could pay my rent. Now I have that job, but I've forgotten how grateful I once was for it." I worked with a young woman who was thinking about quitting because she felt there was nothing left to appreciate. But when we began listing the things her job gave her, the income, the learning opportunities, the supportive co-workers, the safe environment, the career growth, she sat quietly for a long time and finally said, "I guess I've forgotten a lot." Gratitude isn't passive acceptance, it's the ability to see the full side of the glass instead of the empty side. When you look at your job with gratitude, You start noticing the value you've been blind to during stressful days. Stoics kept gratitude journals not to paint life prettier, but to remind themselves that the world is filled with gifts, but only visible to those who look with an open heart. When you're grateful for your job, you stop feeling like you're trapped in a machine. You feel like you have a place in the world. And that feeling is the foundation of loving your work in a mature, grounded way. 7. See your work as an opportunity to train yourself. This is the most important principle and the very heart of Stoic philosophy. Stoics see life as a training ground where every challenge is a workout and every difficulty is a piece of equipment designed to strengthen you. And your job is the biggest training ground you will ever step into. I once asked a young entrepreneur, "What keeps you committed to your work despite all the pressure?" He smiled and said, "My job has taught me more than school ever did." And he was absolutely right. Work teaches you patience. It teaches you emotional control. It teaches you how to collaborate with others. It forces you to push through procrastination. It teaches you honesty, responsibility, and perseverance. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "There is no obstacle that does not contain an opportunity." When you begin looking at everything as a lesson, your frustration naturally softens. Deadlines stop feeling like enemies. They become training for discipline. Difficult co-workers become opportunities to practice calm. Exhausting days become challenges that strengthen your character. I remember a young client once told me, "I'm so tired of this job." "It's too much pressure," I asked him. "If your job had no pressure at all, do you think you'd be growing as fast as you are?" He paused, then smiled. "Probably not. Your work is the place where you're pushed, stretched, tested, where you discover the stronger version of yourself. When you see work as part of your personal development, you don't just love your job more, you love yourself more." As we reach the end of this journey, I want you to pause for a moment and reflect on what resonated with you. You may have realized something that takes many people years to understand. Loving your job doesn't come from waiting for it to become perfect. It comes from learning to see value in the steps you're taking every single day. I've met many young people who believe they'll only be happy once they find their dream job. So they switch jobs, then switch again and again, until they finally realize they've been carrying the same dissatisfaction from place to place. Not because they chose the wrong job, but because they never learned the more important art, the art of creating meaning. And that is the essence of Stoicism. Stoics don't wait for circumstances to change before they feel at peace. They cultivate peace so they have the strength to change their circumstances. They don't wait for inspiration to work. They work to create inspiration. If you look back at the 7 Stoic principles we explored, accepting reality, focusing on what you control, finding meaning in small tasks, building discipline, separating emotions from work, practicing gratitude, and seeing work as a form of self-development, you'll see something very clear. Loving your work isn't luck, it's a choice. One young client once told me her job was too ordinary to love. But after practicing Stoic principles for a while, she said, "I realized the job doesn't have to be special. I just have to be special in the way I do it." That sentence has stayed with me ever since, because in the end, your work reflects you, your patience, your kindness, your attitude, and the way you face pressure. When you work with presence, you stop drowning in stress, you stop waiting for joy to magically appear, and you stop letting your mood dictate your worth. You become the one who creates your work experience, and in that moment, you begin to love your job in the most sustainable way. Before you leave this video, I want to ask you one question. Which of the 7 principles resonated with you the most? Which one do you want to try tomorrow? Change doesn't have to be big. One small step, repeated consistently, can transform your work and your entire life. If today's message brought you peace, inspiration, or simply a new perspective, I'd love to invite you to become part of the journey we're building here at Stoic Awakening More. This channel isn't just for people who love Stoicism, it's for anyone who wants to live more mindfully, more courageously, and more deeply each day. Hit like to let me know this video touched you. Share it with someone who might need it, because gratitude isn't just about receiving, it's also about giving. Click subscribe so you won't miss upcoming videos on modern Stoic living, and leave a comment sharing your story, your struggles at work, or what you're trying to improve. I read every single comment, and I'm always grateful for everyone who chooses to walk this path with us. Thank you for being here, thank you for opening your heart, and thank you for choosing to build a stronger version of yourself, one small decision at a time. I'll see you in the next video on Stoic Awakening More, where we continue exploring how to live deeper, calmer, and stronger in a world that never stops changing.